This lesson is on dividing polynomials by long division. First, I just need to remind you how regular long division works, in case it's been a little while since you've done it. Remember, my first term would go inside the division bracket, and my second term would go on the outside. Then I would simply say, how many times would 5 go into 5? And it would go in one time, and I would line it up directly over that 5, and then multiply these values. 1 times 5 is 5. And I would subtract and bring down the next value. And I would continue this process by subtracting, bringing down the next value, multiplying, etc., until I found my final answer. So 5 into 28 would be 5. 5 times 5 is 25. And then bring down the 9. 5 goes into 39, 7 times, which is 35, and I have a 4 left over. And for now, we're going to stick with the remainder. And so that is how I would divide that by long division. So notice what I did is I found how many times the value on the outside went into the term, multiplied, subtracted, etc. I'm going to do that for polynomials as well. And so you can imagine this is not going to be a truckload of fun. But my top value or first value is going to go inside c squared plus 3c minus 2. And my divisor is on the outside. And what you need to remember when you divide by long division, or in the next video we'll talk about synthetic division, is on the inside you really need to start at whatever the highest degree is. Make sure that this is in standard form, and then even if there was, say, no c value here, I would still write plus 0c, because you have to have a placeholder for every degree all the way down to 0. We'll get to that in the next question. When I do polynomial long division, I start by looking at this first term. So I would say c would go into c squared how many times? Or maybe an easier way to think of it is if I took c squared, this term, divided by c, what would I get? I would get c. That's the value that's going to go up here. And notice I've lined the c to the first over the other c to the first. Then I'm going to take c times this whole binomial. So c times c is c squared, and c times plus 1 is plus 1c. All of that is going to be subtracted. This is the part you really need to pay attention to. When I subtract, I then have to keep, flip, change, or ching everything. So then when I subtract, c squared and minus c squared cancel, which is why I did that, and then 3c and minus 1c gives me 2c, and then I would bring down the minus 2. Again, my focus is entirely on the first term and the first term. So on my next one, I would ask c times what gives me 2c, or 2c divided by c gives me what, which is 2. So the 2, which is positive, would go on the top. 2 times c is 2c, and 2 times plus 1 is plus 2. I'm going to subtract all of it. Remember, when I subtract and I have parentheses, that means to keep, flip, change, or ching. So that gives me 2c and minus 2c, which cancels. If they don't cancel, I did something wrong. And minus 2 and minus 2 gives me minus 4, which means I do have a remainder. My remainder is minus 4 over c plus 1, the c plus 1 coming from here or here. So that this is my final answer. So this did not go in evenly, which will make more sense down the road. Well, we will want it to go in evenly. Let's try another one. Again, we're going to divide. We're going to put the y squared minus 5y plus 6 in the parentheses and y minus 2 on the outside. I start by looking at my y values and saying y times what would be y squared. That would be y to the first. I multiply y times both terms, which is y squared minus 2y. I subtract those terms, so I'm going to ching. That's going to give me minus 3y and plus 6. Then I'm going to say y times what is minus 3y, so minus 3. Then I'm going to take negative 3 times both terms, which gives me negative 3y and plus 6. I'm going to subtract all of this, so that's going to ching, 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 and then I'm going to combine, and on this one I don't have a remainder, and so this would give me y minus 2 and y minus 3. In the next week's lessons, we will learn how to factor, and it will be nice to be able to factor this into y minus 2, y minus 3. This long division question is going to be super fun because it's so complicated. Sarcasm. When I do this long division question, there's a couple of things wrong. First of all, this is not written in standard form. So I would start by writing 9x to the 4th plus 15x to the 3rd. And my second problem comes right now where I don't have an x squared value, so I have to write 0x squared as a placeholder. If you don't do that, you get the entire thing wrong. Then I'm going to write my minus 3x and my minus 5 and my 3x minus 4 on the outside. And now it's just a really fun journey to the answer. 3x times what would be 9x to the 4th? That would be 3x to the 3rd. Multiply that by both terms. And then subtract all of it, remembering to keep flip change. And I end up with 27x to the 3rd plus 0x squared. 3x times what is 27x cubed? That would be positive 9x squared. Multiply that by both terms. And then subtract all of it, which now gives me 36x squared minus 3x. 3x times what is 36x squared? That would be a positive 12x. Multiply it out to get 36x squared minus 48x. Subtract it all to get 45x and bring down the minus 5. 3 goes into 45 15 times. That gives me 45x minus 60, and subtract it all to get 55. So my remainder is a positive 55 over 3x minus 4. Whew. This next one should be a piece of cake after doing that question. So try this one all by yourself, then press play to see how you did. For this one, again, I will start with the 6y squared plus y minus 15 on the inside and a 3y plus 5 on the outside. 3y goes into 6y squared 2y times. 2y times this whole thing gives me 6y squared plus 10y. Then I subtract it, which means I'm going to do some ching ching. Y plus negative 10y would be negative 9y. Bring down the minus 15. And 3y times what is negative 9y? That would be a minus 3. When I multiply negative 3 times all of that, I get minus 9y and minus 15. And when I subtract it all, and ching ching, I get no remainder. So my answer is 2y minus 3.